Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of my channel. Today, we're going to be talking about different creation myths and different themes within them. Um, we I have with me one of my good friends, Caleb. Welcome,
Hello, thank
glad you're
you.
here.
Good to be here.
Um, thank you. And so I guess first off, uh, the first creation myth I wanted to talk about was the Earth Diver creation myth, which is essentially where an overseeing deity uh, sends usually an animal, often like a bird or like a bird or something like that, down into the waters that are there before a or before the creation happens to find a piece of like a rock or something on which to build the earth and humanity, which I think is pretty interesting.
Hmm.
It's Interestingly, it's prevalent among a bunch of North American, Indian, or Native American tribes like the Cherokee and the Shoshone. Um, and
Hmm.
what
That's
did I have
interesting.
here? Oh, and then another group was the Yoruba, which I think is another tribe. But yeah, that's the first one.
Hmm. Yeah, that kind of reminds me of some sort of Judeo-Christian like creation, how and just like in general, a lot of the old like Greek philosophy and things had the earth as being, on water, or the heavens and the firmament and things being like water in a sense, or there's water above or below the earth. Um, I seem to recall in the Genesis story, uh, there's different translations, but something like, the Spirit of God moved upon the waters, or something came upon the waters. I don't remember exactly what part of the creation that was in, but I feel like it was earlier than you would expect.
Hmm.
Um, like I think it was after he kind of created the earth, though. When I read that um, a while back, I had the thought that maybe that would be like a reference to, or maybe an interesting connection if you wanted to connect that story more literally with evolution, would be like, life came from the ocean. So that would be like the creation of life from the ocean. Uh,
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. That reminds me of I think it's like a phrase used a lot in super super deep sciencey fields where it's like turtles all the way down, you know?
oh,
Do,
yeah, yeah. I
do you
think,
recognize that?
yeah, that was from some like very famous story. Uh I think it was Discworld or something, where it's like all the world rests on the back of a turtle. And it's like, oh, what does the turtle rest on? Oh, well, another turtle. Or I think the original story just had one turtle, but this might have, I don't know if this was a story or like another comment or something that came later from some other people, but they said, oh, well, it's turtles all the way down. Like the turtle is on a turtle. Well, what's that turtle on? Oh, another turtle, and it's turtles all the way down.
Yeah, and I think that comes from I believe it's like a Polynesian myth or like myth system where like the world is built on a or land is built on like the back of a turtle, which is like in the water, which I thought was pretty interesting. But um yeah. Um
I actually,
I
oh, go ahead.
sorry, no,
Sorry.
please.
Um, I actually learned recently, I forget the guy's name, but it was, like an ancient sort of Greek philosopher, like one of the something with the H, who's like one of the first mathematicians. He didn't really have a lot of his writings survive, or any really. But we kind of learned about him from Plato. I think it
Ar-
was,
Aristotle?
no, something with an H, like Heraclus or Heraclotus, Herata. I don't know.
Hmm.
Something with an H. But he actually, beyond a lot of math ideas he contributed, he had an idea that water was sort of like the root element almost of like reality, like um so like water is like the foundational element that all reality springs from, you know,
Hmm.
which I mean maybe in a super like abstract figurative way you could say is right if you get into like quantum fields and stuff. Like, well, there, if he said that was what he was referring to, of course they had no idea about that, but there is like some fundamental thing that everything else comes from, and his idea was that that was water. And there was a quote that said like fire or heat. He said heat comes from water, and I was like, I don't know why he thought that. I'm really curious, like if there was some maybe cultural aspect or a specific phenomenon that he was thinking of, or like why he would think that specifically. But I mean, heat and water are usually very fundamental elements. So I found that was very curious that it wasn't just maybe the foundation of the world or the cosmos, but like actual reality.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting because
Very
I
cool.
guess even outside of Greek, um, outside of ancient Greece, a lot of the myth systems were based off of like primordial waters. I
Yeah.
know like a lot of like Norse like creation mythology is based off of like the earth coming or Midgard, I guess it would be, comes from the uh like absolute cold end of the universe and that the absolute hot end of the universe, and like
Oh.
the I guess the Goldilocks zone, to use a sciencey term, is where the earth like basically condensed, you know,
Oh, interesting.
which kind of goes along with the whole like water system. But I guess
Hmm.
in addition to that, there's some more, I guess, that goes into the whole primordial waters thing, which I don't want to really get into because it's, I guess, a little too precise for this scope of a conversation. But
Uh,
yeah,
I also recall a story. I don't know if you came across this in your research, but there's a story, I think, some sort of gods or titans story. Someone gets chopped up. I think it was a woman figure, that she had children or something. They like chopped her up and threw her in the ocean, and that was what created life, or some body parts being thrown into the ocean, and that created life. Maybe I'm getting things mixed up, but
interesting.
there's a
Uh, uh,
surprising number of times people get chopped up and spread out somewhere in myths, it seems like. I mean, if
yeah,
I had a nickel for every time that happened, I would have like at least three nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened that many times.
a man of culture.
Oh yeah,
Yes, sir.
yeah. Usually
Um,
two though, three or four, I think.
the I I guess I'll shift gears a little bit to so like two of them are kind of similar in concept, which is the ex nihilo and the from chaos explanations. Um, I'd I guess in my research I kind of thought that uh like the standard Judeo-Christian in the beginning type myths or creation mythology would like fit more into the from chaos side of things, but uh the people who I read commentaries from said that it would fall more into um the e- the ex nihilo or out of nothing side of things, which I thought was kind of interesting. um
Yeah, I recall some people talking about that. I'm obviously not an expert, but it seems like in somewhat more recent like Christian history is that God is seen as the ultimate good in that creation, that he created like good from nothing, and that's kind of the source of his, I guess, reverence or admiration. Like that was what made him, a noble deity. Um,
Mm.
but in some older, I don't know if it was maybe like a older kind of version or translation, different translation of the Bible, or more maybe just more of a kind of Jewish tradition or kind of some older thoughts. But uh, it used to be more like God was the creator of order from chaos, and that there
Mm.
was already sort of, a sort of chaotic, uh, you know, raw sort of universe that he brought order to. And so that was the source of his, noble character and creation that you could see, as he was the one who brought order to chaos. And that creation wasn't necessarily like, oh, look, I made a thing, but it was like I made goodness from evil. I took something
Mm.
from a chaotic state to an ordered state.
Yeah, kind of along those lines. In my research, they explained the out of nothing paradigm as not necessarily like just, I guess, kind of a spontaneous existence of something, but more of like a it comes from the self, like from the self of the creator. Um,
Mhm.
and an example they used was like Gaia in Greek mythology, how like her body is like how the Greeks considered like her body to be like the earth essentially. Um, or other I guess examples of this would be like from one's like from speaking it into existence, or thinking it into existence. I kind of think of the myth of when Athena came to be, how she kind of popped out of Zeus's head, you know, in like full body armor,
Nice.
with a spear
That's
and
the
a
way I'd
helmet,
I'd like to come out, just arrive
speaking
in
and screaming.
style, make an entrance.
Uh, and then yeah, from chaos, uh, it kind of like what you were saying earlier. It's kind of like from chaos isn't necessarily from nothing or from just random stuff, but from like from disorder, which is what chaos really is disorder into order,
Mhm.
which is kind of what the Judeo Christian, I guess, theology is, you know.
Hmm. Yeah. I kind of wonder. There's probably a much deeper discussion that could be had with the symbolism and like research into different uh myth systems, because I think instead of being like super I guess extreme, or what's a good word, I guess like nitpicky about things being very literal, I think it could be good to look at more of a spectrum sort of. So
Mm.
we as humans think about everything is, physically in existence and physically created, and everything's physical. Um, and then on the far side, there's like ideas, like, you can create an idea, share an idea, and somewhere in that spectrum lies math. There's the age old, and logic and everything. There's the age old question: is math invented or discovered? And there's lots of things, but then in between there, I feel like some of those myths, like, if you can speak something into existence, then it's like maybe ideas and reality are not that far separated. Or if from a body part, or some god sneezes and it creates a planet or something, well, then that's like it kind of came from nowhere, but it also kind of came from the deity. And I don't
Yeah.
know, if any of these deities have origin stories from like what the first one was, like the if the gods came from the Titans, where did those come from? I don't know. I don't know the myths that well, but or if there even is an answer. But like, just because something might not come from something else very physically, logically, like, would you consider that creation from nothing just because it didn't come from something physical, or would it kind of come from something physical, but that being, the deity, which itself might not, physically exist in these mythologies. They, there's a difference between physical matter and whatever the gods are in general conception, especially like, Greek philosophical thought said that like basically matter was dirty and, physical things were impure. I don't know if that was a widespread belief in a lot of myth systems, but
Mm.
I bet I don't know. I just kind of think that there's maybe more of a spectrum between what is real and what isn't real physically and non-physically. Lots of metaphysics you could probably go into.
Metaphysics. Sweet. Uh, the next set of myths, or I guess style of myths, is kind of what you were talking about earlier. The from a body part, which is
Hmm.
uh, or from the body of a deity, which
Hmm.
is the world parent. Like I guess paradigm of creation. And there's like two um I guess two separate schools of thought within the world parent system. Like the first is that the earth was or like th- things were created out of like a union between like a
Oh,
father and a
yeah.
mother, like create creators. And then the second one is that the created stuff was created from like the body of a um like like of a deity essentially.
Hmm.
An
Yeah.
example of the second would be Norse mythology, where uh the I think it's the great grandfather of Odin, Ymir, Ymir,
Hmm.
is what the earth is made out of,
Oh,
which is kind of interesting.
yeah.
That
Huh.
creation myth is has some really interesting uh, things in it that us Western uh, people are would find a little strange.
Yeah, yeah. I bet that's true. Yeah. Huh.
Like cows and sweat and salt licks.
Yeah.
I'll just leave it at that. But
Wow. I'm that is interesting. You know, it it's kind of interesting that so many of these myths have such strange sort of like creation ideas that don't really reflect like reality. Like if someone just came up with them, like was someone just fishing one day and was like, I bet if two people, maybe two gods got together, then like a rock would appear, or like, what the sea seems like some god's big toe, you know, like, and even with like the Cthulhu mythos and some lots of horror supernatural beings that are obviously not really part of a established myth system that have come into being more recently. Like I don't know a lot of those details, but even those have like very strange, supernatural beings that come from one another but are very completely different. It's like, in real life, you don't get like a donkey and an alligator having a kid, which is like a cheetah or a ostrich or something, It's like I'm curious why, people would have these thoughts or like why you would invent something so far distant from reality. But maybe maybe that's exactly why, maybe they had the thought that, divine things wouldn't follow earthly logic or would be so different
Hmm.
in nature. I don't know. Just seems very strange.
Hmm.
Yeah. Like
Uh,
body parts equals earth or sky or something. Like, hmm.
that kind of reminds me. Have you seen Moana, the Disney movie?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
like
So
the some of the stories in that song that he sings are actually like real stories from those
I
myths.
buried an eel and made
Yep.
coconuts and
Yep. Yep. Buried in eel's guts. Boom, now you got coconuts. Oh yeah.
science.
Yeah, pulled the islands up from the sea and all this stuff. Like, yeah.
And I guess it kind of the I can't remember which island it is, but like the green lady, like towards the end of the film, like becomes the one of the islands,
Hmm.
which kind of goes along with um this world parent philosophy, and interestingly, like this is one of the few aspects of mythology that's more like female centric, where like the rest of the myth, like like other parts of mythology are more like male centric, where like like a or like Zeus and the rest of the Olympians fight against Kronos and like free themselves from like inside of him after he eats them, kind of a thing.
Hmm.
Whereas like this one is more like female centric because it like there's the aspect, and especially within this paradigm, the world parent paradigm, there's major themes of like birth, um, and like reproduction in this like I guess system, which requires, you know which necessitates having a female presence, but which I thought was pretty interesting. That like this is
Yeah.
one of the few um aspects of mythology that's more like female centric,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
opposed to
Lots
male.
of female creation. Yeah. Which that makes more sense with the direct corollary because, women create things, obviously, females create things, physically. So if something was going to be made on, a cosmological scale, maybe there's a cosmological source of it that's female,
Hmm,
Like that
for
makes
sure.
a little bit more sense than, ostriches from alligators. Yeah.
uh
There's actually recently I heard about a interesting sort of myth. I think of somewhere sort of Indian culture, very broadly speaking. I don't remember the specifics, but you could see like this statue of this deity figure who is a female, but it was about birth and destruction. Like they kind of had a dual purpose in the mythology. And you could see in this statue, there's like the very, very fearsome looking, woman figure with flames around them, because flames are also symbolic of a lot of destruction, but also creation, because you can, things are molten, you purify them, you create, purity or beauty, you can melt down things and forge things. And so, there's fire and there's this woman, and it shows uh like a person or being born and eaten at the same time, like in a cycle.
hmm,
And it's like that's kind of, yeah, weird by modern standards, but not that weird by myth standards or art culture stuff in general.
uh, going back to the Norse system, that in Norse mythology, there's a snake which is depicted as like eating itself, which is
Yeah,
or the snake is around the earth and it's depicted as like eating itself, which is kind of interesting. Which kind of again goes outside of the scope of creation,
mm,
but yeah. Anyways,
yeah.
um,
That might be partly why snakes, I think, are also often symbolized with like change and renewal and rebirth. Like, because snakes will shed their old skin and oftentimes sometimes eat it for nutrients. And so they will kind of, their old self will die, so to speak, and will be consumed by their new self. And so it's like a death, but it's a new beginning.
That's a cool way that you phrase that. Like, yeah,
You.
like the
Yeah,
old self is consumed by the new.
yeah.
Um, I guess kind of on the subject of I guess renewal and rebirth. Another theme within creation mythology is the paradigm of emergence, where where humanity existed in like another place, and then like basically emerges here.
Oh,
Um, where like creation is more like, or like existence is more of like a process than like a singular event, you know? Or not like
okay.
existence, but yeah.
Hmm. So like closer to a theory of evolution, but still with mythological creation roots.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of.
Hmm.
I guess kind of uh during my research, I was noticing how much like overlap there is between like the out of nothing versus or versus like out of chaos overlap,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
um the emergence versus uh
Yeah.
like or earth parent like thing, but it
Yeah.
it
Actually, I mean, in one way of speaking, or one way of thinking, out of chaos and out of nothing is the same thing, because chaos isn't anything useful or productive, Like, if the form of something is what gives it value or identity, then you can have the exact same constituents or same parts, but either have or not have something based on its form or structure. Like if you take all the atoms of a human and you just have a pile of atoms, that's not a person, you know? And that's actually called emergence, like with emergent properties. Like you can have there's things that are at the atomic scale, and then there's some other things that are at larger scales that aren't at the atomic scales. They're emergent properties.
hmm,
And you can have that with abstract data stuff too, that sometimes if you have layers of complexity where things might exist uh, at bigger levels but not at smaller ones, where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So when you're creating from chaos, you're actually creating things, even if you're not actually creating the constituents.
hmm,
Like we create things all the time, but we're not making new atoms. We're just rearranging them, but we're making things.
hmm. Kind of a lot along those lines. Matter and energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only change form.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
It's cool. That's
Creation
cool.
is just rearranging.
Um, that kind of reminds me of a conversation I had a while back, that like the with a friend, we were talking about like this is actually kind of like very much outside of the scope of this, but I'll share it anyways. Um,
Tangents are
uh,
fun.
so we were talking about like uh how like things like kind of have to have to be separate, like separate and different from other things in order to be themselves, because if everything was the same, then everything would simultaneously be everything and nothing. So like there has to be like boundaries in order to like delineate like this is this and it's not this, because there's like this specific separation between the two of them, which kind of goes along with it, our conversation about like number theory, which is very much outside the scope of creation, but
Yeah.
like how everything can be like can be viewed in terms of like what it isn't, in which case like once we take away what everything isn't, we're only left with what
Yeah.
is, if that makes sense.
Yep. If you aren't what you aren't, then you are what you are.
That's
Double
very
negatives make a positive.
that's very Susian of you, Dr. Seuss. You are you, that is true than true.
You have a head in, yeah. You have a brain in your head and feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself any direction you choose.
um oh, my
So,
my notes were, sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
so you were saying like, there's a creation from nothing or the creation from chaos. Do you have an example to share handy for like the emergence example, like in a myth, or is that
Um
kind of too big for the video?
so in yeah, I wrote something down here. uh so this is another like myth system that's very female centric too, which is interesting. um this also kind of has themes of birth, or like rebirth, and um yeah, and in I think it's a Native American mythology. There's often, yeah, in the Americas, there's different myth systems that have uh like aspects of this emergence theme, where there's like a woman who's a midwife, and like she's the assistant and facilitator of like helping things to like go from their previous
Mhm.
state to the way, like, to existence as we know it.
Yeah. So kind of helpers in the process or guides
Yeah,
or yeah.
yeah, yeah, and she's often described as like a midwife to kind of stick with the birth, like the birth and it, coming to be theme of like going from a less developed, or like less developed and like previous state into a more like into a state like of like into their present, like current state of existence, if that makes
Mhm.
if that makes sense.
Like into their completed state,
Yeah, yeah,
sort of.
complete is a good word. um
They kind of just like help the creation along, sort of.
yeah, yeah, kind of help it along, kind of keep it uh or keep it in track, on check, in check, on track, kind of a thing. um
Hmm.
yeah, and kind of to go to like in a slightly different direction, to kind of go back to the whole like snake thing. um Also kind of not really. In certain um Indian mythology, uh there, and hold on, uh and, and even in like some like Greco-Roman mythology, is the concept of a world or cosmic egg from which things come to be. um
Hmm.
which kind of goes back to the whole to the thing that I'm talking about, with how there's a lot of overlap um with things, or with these themes within creation mythology, like how
Hmm.
there's like it's not so cut and dry. um the way that they kind of explain it is essentially uh the beginning of time, or like the beginning of creation, is from like some sort of like a capsule. The egg uh explanation kind of uh comes from uh a theme that you're talking about earlier, the duality of things, like how fire is not inherently good or inherently evil, how it has like aspects of both. Where there's like the yolk, and then like the white of an egg.
Hmm.
um but in I guess Greek mythology, which I feel like is more accessible of the few. I'm not very well versed in Indian mythology.
Yeah, me either.
But essentially the first Titans, or the first Titan comes from that Earth egg, and from him
Oh.
is what emerges the other Titans, and then the gods, and then uh
So which came
the
first, the egg or the Titan? Was
uh
there a cosmic chicken?
I, I, I was a little afraid that I'd run into that joke, but yeah.
So is there like an explanation for where that egg came from?
Not to my knowledge, no. I might do a reply to this video to kind of clean up a few loose ends, and if you in the comments have any additional, I guess, questions or concerns or input on what I have where I've gone astray, please feel free to to correct me, because we're all here learning together. So I need the help. But yeah, so that's kind of uh the seven different creation paradigms. Kind of just to recap, there's the Earth Diver, which is where a supervising deity tells, and usually an animal, or sometimes it's another human form, to go down and to find a place upon which to create life. Ex nihilo, out of nothing, out of chaos. uh there's those two. Then there's the world parent, um Gaia being a good example of that. Emergence, being that, like, life comes from kind of one place, and then emergent, and then comes out into like where we are to, like, now, in our current state. And then the cosmic egg, which is essentially that uh a being, or the entire system, comes from inside of a, an encapsulated state, and then, like, essentially covers the expanse
Hmm,
of
like the Big Bang. What
basically, yeah.
if it was just all a metaphor for the Big Bang?
I would not put it past him. But yeah, um
Interesting.
but yeah, again, thank you, Caleb, for joining us, and um thanks for watching. Please, again, please feel free to comment on it, on anything you find, you find it interesting, or on anything that I might have uh expressed incorrectly, or need some clarification on, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks, guys.